and this is being recorded, and we'll share the recording with you after. If obviously you don't want to be seen on the recording, you'll keep your camera off. But welcome to the people that are joining us. We're expecting a few more. We've got Jorg, is it Jorg or Jorga? We've got Bob, we've got Naila, we've got Oana, and we've got Shailesh who joined us. It's a very informal session, so we encourage you to put your microphones on if you want to ask a question or use the chat. And we have a bit of a paradox, everyone who's joining us, which is there's so much to see. It is fascinating, this session, as it was this morning. But please do speak to us. Please speak to us in the chat. Please do drive this conversation a bit, and that'd be really helpful. And Marcus, you want that to happen, don't you? You want people to suddenly stop you like the mask.
Yes, absolutely. And if I could ask people, please, assuming their Wi-Fi and internet bandwidth allows it, please do show yourself, switch your camera off. Doesn't matter if you're sitting in your pajamas or in your swimsuit or whatever. We're delighted to see you. We want to get these reactions. And the worst part about this morning for me was actually showing some of these field studies I did and not being able to see your faces at the same time. So if bandwidth allows, and if you're feeling comfortable, please do come in here, show us your face. It makes this whole AI-driven theme a little bit more human, because that's also what it's all about. And since we are going to have hopefully some group discussions and chats, and maybe a little bit less intense session than we had this morning, so more focused on use cases rather than, basically the how we're using the drones and not what we're using, not the tools, then I think there's an opportunity for everyone to get involved, if that makes sense.
So welcome everyone that's joining us for this session. My name is Paul Levy from MKAI. I've been researching AI for over 10 years. I run my own digital consultancy. I'm an academic at the University of Brighton and at Warwick Business School. And so I'm here alongside Marcus, but very much trying to be I suppose the chat show host, and Marcus is very much the main guest here. But we really do want you to join in with us and use the chat, please, if you can. Say hello in the chat. Tell us where you're from right now. Gives us an idea. And we've got already a question in the chat that we'll come to, but we'll try and feed those in. But this afternoon session, if you missed this morning, we are going to have literally a 2-minute recap. But also this morning was recorded, the slides were recorded, all the slides will be shared. I think Alex is going to put the LinkedIn study group that we've created just for this session in the chat at regular intervals, and encourage you to join us. Welcome Naila from Maryland in the USA. So this is Drones and AI part 2. So if you missed part 1, it's well worth seeing. It was very stunningly visual, and as is this afternoon as well. But there is, because of the nature of the enormous amount of preparation that Marcus has very generously done for this session, ideally we would have been in a field doing this live, but that simply wasn't possible when this was all created around Plan B restrictions in the UK around COVID. He's kindly recorded some of this, and all of those recordings are available. And there is a website that Marcus will share a couple of times, and certainly at the end, that's been designed especially for you. And you're going to be able to get access to all this material and a lot more afterwards. But this is really open to be driven by your questions. And even if you think you don't know anything or much about drones and AI, please do join in. So we designed this also, Naila and everyone else, that if you missed this morning, you should still be able to keep up. But there is some deliberate technical information here. But part of that is to also show you that you can do this. The whole purpose of this is that these are affordable drones. The technology are apps that you can download to your phone. There's a learning curve you have to go down, but you can start to use AI very, very quickly, not years, and you don't need to buy people in to do this for you. And that's what Marcus has been showing. So without any further ado, please do say hello to us in the chat. If everybody on this call could do that, let us know where you're from. It really helps us to tune this in the Q&A. We are going to break out a little bit later, because this is also about use cases. We're encouraging everybody to imagine how they might use this in different contexts, how this, I would say, quite early and basic approach to AI could be used in your company and in different industries. We'll be sharing a couple of use cases later, but please don't feel you're not qualified to ask questions and join in. So without further ado, you know where the chat is at the bottom. You can raise your hand, you can type questions in the chat, you could even unmute yourself with this number of people and say, hey, can I come in there with a question? Please imagine we were in a room sitting around in a circle chatting, rather than this feeling that you're just watching some TV, which you're most definitely not. Over to you, Marcus. I'm really looking forward to this.
Thank you so much, Paul, for being my trusted wingman, my trusted co-pilot, and at times also air traffic controller, who then brings me back on course.
Yeah, you've given me permission to shut you up, haven't you, when you're going on for too long?
You have permission to shut me up, and if you need to shoot me down, well, please not, but shoot me down if you know what I mean.
Time for takeoff.
So takeoff. This is Drones and NI part 2. If you have missed part 1, as Paul said, please do watch the recording. It's worthwhile doing it. You will get a more human entry from me here. I had a rather weird appearance this morning, but that's something for you to check back. Now, this whole course is centered around business use cases for budget-friendly turnkey drones and AI solutions. I'm going to show you a few in a little while for those who have missed it this morning. But equally important, I think, this second part, and the reason we've done this in 2 parts, the first section this morning was really focused about the what, what are the drones, what are the AI solutions, what is a native app, what is a third-party app, and how can this all be combined. The second part is much more in terms of innovation, business orientation, potential use cases, opportunities for you. All of this is meant to inspire you, because I know we had about 200 signups for this particular course. We had signups from all different countries, which is the beautiful thing, because initially we wanted to do this in a classroom style fashion. That hasn't happened. What I would say is we are going to do a little recap in a minute. All of the sessions, all of the video sequences are available on this dedicated companion website, and also everything from part 1 will be on there as well, aidrones.training. But the way this whole course has been structured, because we couldn't take you in the classroom, what I did was I took different angles, different sequences, including 360-degree videos taken in the field whilst flying the drone. So you get an immersive as possible experience despite being next to me and watching me whilst I'm flying this thing. And at the same time, you get recordings of the screens. You see when the AI is popping in, doing certain things. And we've been trying to keep this as immersive as possible, maybe even pushing this course eventually into the MKAI metaverse. Paul has got a setup of a room, an art gallery, I think, on spatial. I might also take this into the spatial space. Sorry, I got some echo now. Thank you. I might also take this into a spatial space, and then it becomes very different when you watch the 360 videos with an Oculus or similar VR classes. Now, Paul said already, let's do a little bit of a recap, which I think is important for 2 reasons. It's important for setting the scene from where we came this morning to where we're going with this section of the workshop. But it's also important for the new joiners that might have not been able to watch part 1 session this morning to really quickly get an idea of what this is about and how to get into this whole area. Now, I call this a very powerful pairing. And when I say powerful pairing, I'm talking about lightweight, sub 250 gram consumer drones for the reason they are budget friendly. They do have some software limitations compared to the bigger drones. And you will often in these slides find references to SUAV. That is a definition that I introduced in the morning. It stands for Small Unmanned Aerial Vehicles, for the simple reason drone has got some sort of negative connotations in people's minds. And whilst I might be droning on a little bit, and Paul might tell me not to, it's important that we get the terms right here. So SUAV is what I will be referring to through most of these slides. What we're talking about is things like a DJI Mini 2, which looks like this. It's the most modern drone currently available, although I've heard already rumors there's a new version of this coming out in April. We have got a Rise Tello, which is a very small drone, and the opening sequence of this morning's session was actually filmed with that, for the simple reason the AI that is being used, because it's so simple and straightforward, becomes very visual. But there's others as well, and as I said in part one, we're introducing some of these tools. Then we've got smartphone AI apps, and often these are linked to web interfaces. The ones I use throughout this course, and later on you will see a couple of examples where I've deployed that technology, is Litchi, which is a third-party smartphone app that allows you to control the drone in ways that the native application cannot do. Then DroneLink to do mapping missions and to do autonomous flying of the drone. And then finally OpenDroneMap, which is a budget-friendly tool to do geospatial mapping, ortho modeling, and also use algorithms and AI to do crop yield, plant health analysis. And I'm giving you a real life example of what I'm working on. So why are we doing this? Paul, you had a question, I think.
Well, no, it was just, and part of that reflection on this morning for people joining us, but perhaps as a good reminder for people who were here this morning, is I picked up two really key foundation things for this afternoon. One of them is we have a working definition of AI here that's important, perhaps to know, in that you can buy drones and they fly. But it's possible to add functionality, which we're calling AI augmentation. And it is absolutely AI, it's using algorithms and so on. And it enables your drone to do things that could be of real use in a small business context. And we were particularly looking this morning at things like geospatial mapping, but also film making and so on, that in the past you may have had to pay somebody a lot of money to do. And so AI augmentation is when what you can do with the drone replicates what a human being used to do manually far, far better, but also enhances it and creates new possibilities by offering more intelligent functionality. And it's using AI, it's artificial intelligence augmented. And so that's the first thing. And the second bit is that you've already hinted at this, that there are drones out there with legal kind of issues that are thousands of pounds, and you can see them being used, actually in war, and you can see them being used in other industries. But what you've brought this morning and what you're bringing this afternoon, Marcus, which is why we focus this also on what could I do, what could a small business do, is we're talking here drones that are within certain legal limits that enable you to do things, and they are priced in the hundreds, not the thousands of pounds. And your smartphones that are probably on your desk in front of you can download apps that actually enable you to do this stuff. So literally, and I just checked actually over lunch, you could buy one of these drones. It could potentially arrive on Amazon tomorrow, not yet by drone. And you could be downloading apps and flying this thing tomorrow night and going down the learning curve that Marcus himself has been. So we've tried to create the version of this that's really accessible and usable to you. When we look at use cases later, as we mentioned this morning, you might get that light bulb moment and say, I've got an idea. I want to try this, and it could be happening over the next few days in your company.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I think you summarized already what's at the bottom here. By combining these sub 250 drones with additional software that can augment what's possible, you ending up with maximal freedom with regulatory in terms of regulatory flying restrictions, certainly in the UK. Obviously, you need to check nationally, and whichever country you are, what you're permitted to do, how are you allowed to fly, how far you're allowed to fly, and so on. But if you want to get maximum operational freedom, then this is the optimum pairing, really, that's currently available. And some of the AI tools we've covered this morning and also will be deploying for some of the case studies this afternoon is flight AI augmentation tools. That's Litchi. We've given some examples this morning how this works in terms of person tracking. We've got DroneLink, which is really to set up autonomous flight mission, so-called waypoint mapping missions, and then basically go out with the drone, stick the battery and switch it on, load that programmed flight mission onto your drone, let the drone do its thing. It records pictures, or you can also set it so it records video, whatever you want. Then it comes back automatically. And then by doing that, you've harvested some data, and then you can do certain things with the data you harvested. For instance, use WebODM drone map to do geospatial mapping. At the bottom is some additional tools you probably will be using. So for instance, air data UAV, as well as drone assist, that allows you to do your flight planning, particularly if you're a business, because you need to think of aspects such as, risk management, risk assessments. You need to record all this kind of stuff. There will be some flight logging that is required, also some insurance requirements. In terms of insurance, it's possible now to get a smartphone app, and you can do pay-by-flight insurance at a commercial level. So all these kinds of things are available out there. They require a little bit of research, but they're worthwhile doing. Finally, for this particular recap, I introduced a...
Just before you do that, Marcus, we've got a question in the chat from Vishal, and just this sets a clear boundary. When we were referring to the top end, expensive, large drones, they're the ones we're talking about full autonomy. Here, we're not talking about full autonomy in this session, are we?
No, this is semi-autonomous drones. A full autonomy you typically would find in a sort of military setting. You don't necessarily get them in the consumer market, even if you pay an awful lot of money. And the reason for that is full autonomous flying for you and me, from a civic perspective, is not really permitted in the UK. You might get some special operational permission by the Civil Aviation Authority, but I'm not aware of any, and I don't think it happens very often, because ultimately, even if you're using some of these tools such as DroneLink, and even if you're flying the drone as autonomous as possible, you are still the pilot and you're still in charge, and if anything goes wrong, you're responsible for it, and you will still have full control, meaning whilst it's doing its thing, and we've seen an example this morning, whilst it was doing its autonomous flying, I had to intervene and get the drone up a little bit higher because there was potentially trees in the way. At that point, the autonomous mechanism switched off, and I had to do it again. And that's why I saw me repeating this twice. If you saw the session this morning, fully autonomous, no. Semi-autonomous, yes. AI augmentation, yes, as well. And there's a bit of an overlap of these two. So it's not always easy to say this is semi-autonomous, this is AI. These things could overlap within the drone, depending how you're using it. But yeah, it's worthwhile pointing this out. So with that said, I introduced a kind of, I guess, structured thinking along the flying this morning, and I'm not going to go into details, but basically, particularly if you're an organization, if you're a company, if you're a business, and you have a production workflow, meaning you want to do something with the drone. And remember, ultimately, all the drone is, it's a tool, it's a platform, could be a camera platform, it's got 4K camera, most of the modern ones, or you might go a little bit higher and attach some sensors to it. So for instance, a LiDAR, which is similar to radar, but in the near field, a thermal imaging sensor or something else. All it is, it's a flying platform that allows you to get up into the air within certain guidelines. And in the UK, it's 120 meters or 400 feet. But, even 5 years back, if you wanted to do that, you probably would otherwise have to hire a helicopter or a commercial small airplane to get up into the air to do air, videos, footage, whatever. Now the drone is your platform. It's a flying camera. It's a flying platform that enables your business to do certain things. But if you look at this from a business perspective, you as a business will be producing materials, digital assets, if you like, whether that's footage, whether that's a map, whether that's something else. So you need to begin with the end in mind, almost post-flight, and then work your way back to understand what you need to do. And then pre-flight, you're setting your objectives in order to getting to that. You see it all listed here. It's really a structured thinking process to determine what is the best drone for the best activity.
And we covered that in a lot of detail this morning. So I do encourage anybody to watch the video, which we'll be sharing. later as well.
We did indeed. Can I ask if anyone's got any questions at this point? Because we're going very soon into our first case study.
Yeah, so we got a couple of questions coming in here. We answered the one about the drone operator. Henry has got a question. Is the line of sight for the operator still required in the regulations with semi-autonomous? You know, the line of sight. So you can't, that's right, isn't it? You can't have a drone for everybody where at some point you, the operator, cannot see it or it cannot see you.
So there's different levels of authorization. The certificate I've got is called the A2. That's a certain class of drone. COFC certificate by the Civil Aviation Authority. That goes by weight. That only allows me to go visual line of sight, VLOS. There is others beyond that. For instance, general line of sight. That allows you to go a little bit further. The kind of thing for an autonomous or semi-autonomous drone. So for instance, an Amazon Prime Air drone that you have in a sort of village hub location that takes off and then goes 20 miles out. Obviously, that's out of visual line of sight. At that point, you would need to get a special operations permission by the Civil Aviation Authority, and you need to put, as a company, a special operations manual together that does all these things we talked about, including a risk assessment, including explaining what you're doing. And then someone from the CAA, the authority, will look at this and at some point give you a permit, say, yes, perfectly fine, you can do that. At that point, it's almost like taking up a commercial airplane and having all the registrations and all the flying permits.
I put the rules in the chat here. I found a couple of very useful links because we were going to be asked this. So move us on now beyond this morning. I think we've probably done enough recap.
I think so too. So this is the sort of really the basics, the foundations you need to be aware of, in particular the workflow. Now, ignore that picture of me doing a FPV flying, which is first person view, where you actually see on the VR glasses what the drone is flying. And this was a good few years ago, so technology has moved on quite a bit since that. What I'd like to do is I would like to introduce a company based in the UK in Peterborough, so not too far away from Milton Keynes. They're called Airborne Platforms UK. I used them a couple of years ago, just at the beginning of COVID, to do my own certification, but they are doing other things as well. And I wanted to understand from them a little bit more how drones are being used. So I interviewed them. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to stop this and share the video. Their responses to me. We just had this morning that the settings need to be optimized. I won't be able to see you, but Paul, you're able to interject if questions or anything. So I've asked them, what are the typical business use cases for sub 250 gram drones? I would add to that, this is only a small extract from the conversation I had with them. The full interview, which is good 40-50 minutes, is actually on the companion website as well. So let's start this and give you an idea of what business use cases there are.
Certainly with inspection, the cameras are getting better and better, certainly with the Mini 2, being able to get in close and get very good imagery. Imaging roofs and creation of kind of ortho planes, which are essentially the whole stitched image sets where a roof can be imaged in full and then put into reports. Certainly, we've seen them being used for a lot of film and video work, where previously film teams would rely on companies using, aircraft like this, which is of course the original Inspire, with a Mini 2. Again, the camera on it, I was commenting the other day how the camera on this tiny little 250 gram drone is probably, if you can see here, this was an X3 camera here.
Yeah.
And this was industry standard like 4 or 5 years ago. Now the camera on the Mini 2 probably is an improvement on that. So, but then also from the mapping side of things, creating these ortho mosaics and then using kind of third-party software to then to highlight certain areas on those maps and count things like crop counting. That's something that can be done. Artificial scouting. There's a company in the northeast who've worked out a solution for scouting, where scouting, of course, in agriculture is where agronomists or farmers will go out and review parts of the field and make assessments per meter based upon crop health. Now, with a Mini 2, which is one of the aircraft they actually recommend, that can fly a field, and then their software will, just from standard RGB, which of course standard daylight imagery, like a normal camera would shoot, will actually give a profile as to how well the crop, they think the crops are doing. So that's the company in the northeast called Skippy. They're using that. Certainly, yeah. So many different applications.
So that was Chris Marshall from Airborne Platforms UK. We're going to see him a little bit later, but I think at this point in time, I'm just checking, we've got 19 participants here. Paul and I are interested to find out really from you which use cases you could think of for deploying such small drones within your business projects that you're working on. And also, really, at this point in time, what do you think are the biggest questions and showstoppers for the use of drones? I'm just going to quickly stop this and get shared back with the visual.
So we want to adapt the workshop just briefly. I don't want you to suddenly sigh and think, oh my God, they're putting us in a breakout for 2 hours. It's not. It's that we can adapt a little bit of what we talk about later and try and come up with some relevant answers. But at the moment, whether you think you know a lot about drones or not, we want to invite you to think about as many use cases as you have heard of or think might be possible for these drones. These drones have cameras attached, they have apps attached. You've probably heard of how they are used by insurance companies to, map your roof, and they're used in agriculture. But think about your businesses. I shared one this morning where I'm actually going to use one of these drones to film me as I walk along Brighton Seafront recording a video blog for my website, which is currently very clunky, and its ability to follow me is quite interesting. So just literally a short conversation, but just see if you can brainstorm as many as you can. And also, what do you think are the biggest questions for the use of drones in your business? And you may not have a business, so think up another one, but what do you think would be the challenges, the questions around that? So part one, think of some use cases, see how many you could brainstorm. Don't worry if they're right or wrong, but what could you imagine you could use a drone for like this? A drone that can follow you around, a drone that can map, a drone that can essentially sense from a different angle from higher up. All the possibilities, just to get us thinking about drones and see what we come back with. And then also, what are some of the big questions you think businesses need to consider? So we're literally just going to go into a brief conversation of 5-10 minutes or so, and then I'm going to invite the groups to feedback. So just setting those groups up now. I think we've probably got enough for 3 groups here.
Yeah.
And we'll probably pop around as well. Let's come back in about 5-10 minutes. You should get an invite inviting you to join that room, so please do. So everybody in the room should be getting an invite to join a breakout group. So please join that breakout group if you can. We've still got a few people here. Just checking with, is it Jaba and Yaba and Oana, Andrea, to join one of those groups as well, please. Are you there? Just checking.
if you need some help, you can message us, or you can unmute yourself. We're there to help. If you're not sure how to join the room.
So it's just Oana and
And
Java now to join one
yes.
of the rooms, please.
And Antonio, he logged out and now he's back there.
I'm not sure how you assign someone to a room that's in the main room without. Antonio, do you have an invite to go into one of the breakouts? If not, I'd put you in group 1.
Oh, we can assign, yeah.
I've done that. So it's just Java and Oana who are just here, probably stepped away.
All good, all good.
Still got Antonio here though.
Yeah, there we go.
Great.
Terrific. 5 to 10 minutes then.
I think so, yeah.
Right.
That gives them a good conversation.
Jabber logged out, but
No, I put Java in the waiting room to come back in again.
oh,
Java, you should have an invite to go into a breakout group, I think. Welcome, Abhinav, who's just joined. We're currently in breakout rooms just for a few more minutes. So I'll put you in a breakout room and they'll tell you what you need to do. Just having some good conversation. So please accept the invite that's just come to you to go into a breakout.
Hello.
Hopefully people are coming back.
Nice.
40 seconds. Henry was on his own. The other two weren't saying a word. But back here now, I think.
Hello, Henry. Glad to see you here.
Hi, nice to see you too, Alex. That is Alex, isn't it?
Yes, yes. Hiding behind Team MKI.
It's always a very rude introduction to say hello and sorry for bringing everyone back in the middle of their conversations. But here we are all back. So we just broke you out very roughly into groups. It'd be good just to hear back on those two questions. I know I just popped in and joined Henry, and we're the only two talking in that group. But Henry, you raised some interesting questions, and any examples of use cases from that group you were in?
I think Reka was saying marine review and analysis and search and rescue for remote areas is a good one.
Right.
I was thinking about kind of things like surveillance, picking up fallen trees or cars parked where they shouldn't be. So looking for like differences and anomalies.
So just picking up on that one, and also Rakers, I guess when we're talking about physically rescuing people, and when we're talking about picking up fallen trees, we're at a different type of drone. So we are talking about those bigger drones, you know, that pick up large weights. Here, I guess search and rescue is the ability to lead people to someone that's lost.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking about doing something about it. I was thinking about actually finding things that then needed further investigation or people to go out and visit.
Yeah.
Rather than the drones actually trying to pick up trees or anything serious like that.
And I just mentioned also, I don't know if you'd heard of this, Marcus, but some experiments around, it's sad because they're talking about the death of the high street, but also shops are still very much on the street. And if you're in a large shopping centre and you're looking for a particular product and the drone simply leads you to it and it checks your following and finally it takes you into the right shop, it's even got access to a database that tells you whether your size is on or whether it needs to order it. You could even just say buy it or have it ready for me when I leave the shopping centre, and this becomes your personal shopping assistant, a very small drone that becomes, you know, really good. So we've got lots of use cases. You also made a comment about, you know, the classic privacy stuff. What was your concern there, Henry?
Yeah, I was just a bit unsure about what happens if you're using a drone and you know, pick up people's faces and car registration numbers and house numbers. Whether you've got to somehow take those out of your data by blurring them, or whether you can use them internally yourself. And then what happens if an AI gets put on as another layer? Yeah, you can then do things based on getting that information, or whether you've got to kind of have a non-militarized zone, firewall zone around it, so you can use it internally because it's for your own private use. But as soon as you try and send it anywhere else, then there's all the privacy issues.
It's some interesting comments. Thank you, Henry, and thank you, Paul. Just let me address some of those. So in terms
of can we just go around each group first, just to get everyone involved, and then we'll come back to each point, Marcus, if that's okay. Can we go to the second group, which is I think Bob Sutton? Were you in the second group? I think. Bob, are you there? Anyone else from Bob's group that can share with us?
Yeah, I was there, but it'd be nice if
who else was in your group?
Shared. It was Vishal and Nyla as well.
Okay, well, any of you, Nyla, are you able to share with us what came up in your group? Oh, Bob's there. Is Bob there? No. Nyla or Vishal? Vishal's appeared.
Yeah. Yes.
So what were some of the use cases and the questions that came up?
The question is when we start to survey something, so how it will work? It's a semi-autonomous, or like we can do like fully autonomous capturing the data, or like These things I want to know.
Okay. And what were some of the use cases the group discussed?
So Bob gave a good example. He's running cycling tours in Canada, obviously in quite a rural area, and he's using already a drone for recording those. He uses a Hubsan Mini SE, which has got built-in tracking functionality, and hence you can, easy jump on the bike, focus the drone on you or on the mobile phone and just let it record and get some good video footage coming out of it. Naylor is currently considering a change of career, and as part of that has been looking into the use of drones, and she actually gave some good tips as well, which I want to reinforce here. If one of the internal barriers is, oh, this is all too scary, this is too much technology, whatever, you can buy very simple manual drones on Amazon. So for instance, a Hubsan X4 is one example. That's about $30 or £25 maybe. It's completely manual, hasn't got any GPS, any sensors. It does have a very simple camera built in. Some of the versions have, some haven't. And you can learn very easily manually flying with the drone for very little money. And the advantages, of course, if you crash it, well, they're quite resistant anyway. But if something goes wrong, and you're losing hundreds of pounds. But it does make sense if you want to move into an area where you're using AI to augment what you're flying, to actually learn completely manual flying skills first, because that makes you a better pilot over time. And maybe there's an opportunity for you, Paul, to get one of these, and when the weather gets a bit better, out to the beach and just flying that around purely for fun, to learn how this thing works. And then Vishal was suggesting he, with a couple of friends, are looking into potentially establishing a drone business with a focus on forest survey and or housing surveys. And for that kind of activity, it was actually recommended getting a little bit more expensive drone, for the simple reason they have additional sensors built in. They have got obstacle avoidance, and that allows to fly these in a safer fashion in a sort of more densely populated area, or even a forest with a lot of trees, basically, because that AI from an obstacle avoidance perspective works quite well. Last point for me in terms of safe search and rescue. So I've been involved in 2 searches of lost dogs here in my local park, and once have been successful with finding one of those, for the simple reason the drone makes a noise, and when you get it low enough, I did get the attention of the dog. Obviously, I could see on the monitor where the dog was, and by doing that, I could sort of trick the dog into following my drone back to me, and then give the dog back to the owner. So that works. And there's some Facebook groups out there where people are registering with these little drones, and if there's a local search effort, they get pinged, and they can basically go out, get the drone up, have the description of the dog, and try to look around. Much better, of course, if you've got a drone with built-in thermal imaging sensor, because then you can see it if it's in dense vegetation or whatever. But these things are done already, and they work quite well.
Yep.
Did we have a third group?
Third group, maybe Deborah? There you are, Deborah.
There I am. Hello, can you hear me?
Got you.
Yeah.
Okay, so in my group, we were talking about, we brought up the scenario of the supermarket and, finding your items on a shelf and mapping where you are in the store. And we also talked about using drone as a tool for surveying buildings and collecting data. And we had, just like myself, a novice on the call who's taken an interest in learning a lot more about drones, to also consider the use of using drones to survey, and just really sort of general, finding out a little bit more general knowledge about what drones can do and the different types of drones that we can use.
Excellent. And just to add in a few since even the session this morning, we've heard a lot about insurance companies that use drones to, things like assess roof damage and so on. Equally, if you're a local trader, you can do a circle of a house. You can then put graphics onto that show what the house would look like. If you redecorated it, if you redid it, what a loft room would look like. but a view from above, you can just assess damage, not from an insurance point of view, but say, I'm going to do this work mending your roof, and this is where the problem is, and you can show what that looks like. So just in terms of trading, all the stuff about making promotional material, tours of buildings, how to get from one of our offices to the one on the other side of town. Even schools have been using them for treasure hunts in education, and then they get to learn how to use the drones, using them in training, all kinds of possibilities. Okay, let's come back to you now, Marcus, as you take us into some very visual use cases.
Yeah, let me.
And thanks for everybody for taking part in that.
So let me go back and share the slide. Thank you everyone for contributing to this exercise. This was really intriguing, and it's great to see that some of you are already using drones for both their business and their leisure. And I'm sure there is more that can be done. So I've scraped the web a little bit, and I follow a lot of YouTube channels, Facebook pages, social media channels, to get some ideas of what kind of businesses are out there. And there's some obvious ones on there. So for instance, taking pictures, taking videos, of course, film production. I've seen a cinematic car a promotional video this morning, actually, just by chance, because I was looking on YouTube for sub 250 gram drones, and turns out someone filmed a full commercial for a Honda car with one of those drones. So you can easily go either into that kind of business, or you could think about augmenting your operations if you're an advertising agency, a marketing agency. If you're a real estate agent, particular selling the sort of more bigger, extensive properties these days, I think people always almost expect to get nice looking pictures, but in addition, nice looking video footage, both from indoors and outdoors. Now, indoors, if you do that kind of thing, you could combine it with a 360 camera and do some nice either indoor real estate footage, again, pictures or videos, or you could even do some, I think there's a website called Matterport. You can do 3D modeling of the property and do basically a modeled walkthrough. And obviously you could combine that with drone footage. So I've done a video for my local tea room here in the Discovery Center, where basically I use a 360 camera to film inside, but make it look like a drone is flying through, because that's possible with some editing trickery. And then combine that with outdoor footage, with the drone flying away from the center in a safe fashion. And that can look really stunning. But, there's other things. Obviously, with more people buying drones, more drones get damaged, and there will be a need for people to repair drones. There will be a need for programmers to come up with custom solutions for some of those drones and build the kind of AI that sits within these flight controllers. I mean, what we're doing here at the moment is a kind of an innovative use of drones. We're doing a course, right? But you also could become a freelance drone pilot. Drone insurance, we talked already about. There is actually now drone racing leagues that are using FPV. FPV is first person view, where you've got these classes that I showed you earlier on one of these title slides. But there's, 5 to 10 people sitting in chairs. They don't move anywhere, and they need to sit in chairs because, funny enough, when you have these FPV classes on, and they're quite immersive, and you get sort of flying experience, if you're not quite robust, you can get very easily seasick, and that happened to me as well, because you get the look and feel of sitting on top of the drone and looking at the camera. These racing drones can fly very, very fast, up to 80, 100 miles per hour in some cases. And there's proper racing circuits that have been set up just for that. They have a large following online, and that also means there's a potential to become a niche social media influencer who focuses on drones, businesses, new developments in that space. Security surveillance is another area, search and rescue, we covered already, but then also increasingly more drone shows and performances. You will remember probably seeing the New Year's Eve fireworks over London, which was an interesting combination of some fireworks and some drones that had some big strobe lights on top. And the nice thing is you can do things with drones at night and different colored lights attached to it that you cannot easily replicate with a firework. For instance, writing in the sky, that kind of creative work. Paul, I don't know if you wanted to say something, you popped on quickly.
Just being clear again, all these examples you're giving, it's the SUAV that these are using AI.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. For all of, well, more or less, right? But the idea is you use a drone not just as a camera platform. You're doing additional things with it, data harvesting, for instance. We'll talk about this in a minute. There's also more artificial intelligence companies coming up on the horizon that are looking at the drones. And once again, I have asked, stop sharing this now, I have asked Chris from Airborne Platforms to see the sort of latest trends he has become aware of as part of his work, and to understand how AI companies out there are developing their businesses in combination with drones. And there's, I think, some interesting examples in there. Some of these were alluded to already in very briefly this morning, but I think it's worthwhile listening to him, what he's got to say. So let's see if this works.
So his company basically,
Yes, it's coming up.
Can you see that? Company called basically Neurala, and they're actually working with AI and vision software, and specifically kind of drone solutions, not just for kind of food preparation, but they're actually working for kind of development of AI for individual identification of people in crowds and so on and so forth.
Yeah,
and through the use of their AI kind of detection systems and UAS. So it's certainly a big company to watch there. Then companies like Scale. This is a company that allows you to basically the capturing data to be, and then rationalizing, being able to create detectors and kind of custom detectors to rationalize that data and pull kind of key information out over large data sets. Certainly, and a lot of companies involved in kind of working with this company, and I know they're using UAS solutions and developing it. Again, here Skydio.
Skydio is in there, American company.
Exactly. Yeah.
They're known for their, their autonomous flight capabilities, and obviously, I think the Skydio 2 is out now. If people want to watch some of the flight capabilities on YouTube, it's absolutely mind-boggling, because this is completely AI augmented. And very precise flying at the same time in very complex and challenging environments. So that's definitely one to watch, I think.
Yeah, so quite amazing, and worth looking at if you want to kind of go into their system. So all about autonomous vehicles, not just aerial vehicles, but also kind of subsea and ground based as well.
Yeah,
so
everything,
very interesting. And then Skycatch is another really interesting one. Another iteration of a capture software and basically UAS capture software and analysis tools, all kind of built in together. Certainly using daylight imagery, multispectral imagery, or LiDAR point cloud data and analysis of those kind of things. As we can see here, look, here's what essentially is a digital surface model with contours on it. So clear that they're able to kind of take volumetric readings from that kind of thing. So those are really kind of the key ones at the moment that certainly ones to watch. If you like, software companies that are working with UAS and kind of specifically kind of UAS analytics and drone analytics. And I was actually leading on to the actual companies that are using AI in the development of their drones. I mean, Skydio is the key one there, really. and there's a lot of other companies, but the one that springs to mind with a product that's available to the likes of us, if you like, rather than very large companies like Thales or any of the kind of larger kind of UAS certified category operators. Skydio is the one to watch as far as flight controller AI and automated flights. Another company called UGCS as well have a product called Atlas, which is very, very useful. Atlas will take an orthomosaic and you can train a detector to select and count certain components on it. Say make 5 detections of certain things on the orthomosaic, and all of them will then be it will take an hour or so for a very large data set, but then it will give a count on how many of the items that you specified.
So I think we can stop this here, but you get a pretty good idea in terms of development that is going on, not just for the drones themselves, but also for the processing of the data that these drones have harvested in the process. But equally, a lot of these manufacturers are now actually using artificial intelligence as part of the production life cycle for these drones to get a better understanding how they work, make these production life cycles more efficient, and then also some of the outcomes of their findings might then be deployed to the actual product design of these drones. I'm just stopping this now and going back to our normal sharing screen. Is there any questions at this point from anyone, including Paul?
No, I don't think so.
No. In that case, I suggest we can go to, well, before we do that, I suppose a lot of people have probably thought about, okay, I'm here now, I get this. There's drones, they're fairly fairly affordable, they're quite budget friendly, and there's AI tools and third-party apps out there that you could use. If I wanted to get into a space where I would be looking at something a little bit beyond the simple flying, and in terms of regulation, what are the key things I would need to be aware of, and what I would need to do? And again, I'll come back to Chris here because he's the expert. They do training in this all the time, and I've asked him basically, what do people need if they want to fly as UAVs for their business? Once again, I'll stop sharing and I'll go back to the optimized version. Just let's listen in a little bit for his response. I might stop this sort of halfway through, but it gives you a good idea. And also, all of this, remember, will be available on the companion website, so you're not missing out anything here if you can't listen it or if the connection is cutting out. But hopefully this works. Let's see.
So the landscape as far as kind of competence training in the UK, there are kind of three steps, depending on what essentially you want to do with kind of UAS systems. The first step is something we don't offer. It's something that you have to do directly with the Civil Aviation Authority.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, if you like, your A1, A3 training, which allows you to fly in the A1 and A3 subcategory of the open category, which is a category of the new regulations for lower risk operations.
Yeah.
So you do that by going to the Civil Aviation Authority and applying and under something called the DMARE system, Drone and Model Aircraft Registration Education Scheme, and completing a test on that and getting two things, the flyer ID and an operator ID. So before you go out and buy a drone, you can't just go out and buy a drone and then just fly it. And that's really, really important that you make that step.
That you do this, yeah.
Exactly. And then the next step, of course, is to go on to go your mid-level competence, which doesn't include a flight test with a company like us, as far as a practical flight test. but it's a theoretical course which covers kind of key airmanship and many different topics on good airmanship and aircraft and the regulations and so on and so forth. And that's got something called the A2C of C, which stands for essentially A2, which is the A2 subcategory. I mentioned before the A1 and A3, well, it's
A3, yeah.
A2 subcategory certificate of competency. We're currently doing that for £70, which is, you know, pretty good good offer. And I think we're going to be giving you a very kind of special discount on that as well. So watch that space. And now the next step, so that will allow you essentially to fly in the A2 subcategory, A1, A2, and A3 of the open category for lower risk operations. Drones up to 2 kilos currently. So again, anything over 2 kilos, then they have to be flown in the A3 subcategory of the open category. Then the higher level competence is the GVC, which stands for essentially General Visual Line of Sight Certificate.
Yeah.
And that is comparable with the old, when I mentioned before, the Permission for Commercial Operation course, which is now defunct. The GVC course is the new course for flying in the specific category, which is where you apply to the CAA for an operational authorization. We help you develop an ops manual and way of, and specific safe systems of work for operation of aircraft up to kind of 25 kilos, but between that 2 kilo limit and even under that 2 kilo limit, up to 25 kilos. Now, there's always an advantage in getting a company like us to certify you, because of course, when you're applying for certain jobs and when you're applying for to clients, often they want to see a higher level of competence, and that's something that we can provide. So two certificates, A2 CFC, which is the one for flying in the A2 subcategory, and then the GVC is the one that for flying in the specific category.
Okay, so let me stop this and let's go back to the smaller screen so I actually get to see you. Now, this gave you a very brief overview of what would be required if you want to fly from a business perspective. I have to say this is with regards to the UK, where I'm currently am. There's different requirements in the US. For instance, in the US, you can do so-called trust recreational license. That is for free. In Europe, most places in Europe, you can do an equivalent to the A1 and the A3, also for free with the, I think it's the European Space Agency or Aviation Authority in Luxembourg, and you can get a certificate there. You have to sit an exam and take a 2 or 3 hour course with them. Now, if you are based in the UK and you are interested in increasing your skills and getting one of these little cards and a certificate, and that lasts for 5 years, issued by the Civil Aviation Authority, you could go to Airborne Platforms UK. So the website is there and they'll be in the materials. You could select then on their website the A2 COFC course, set up a free training account with them and enter MKAI drones, and you enjoy a 15% discount. It then means you get more detailed training in terms of aerodynamics, metrology, regulatory requirements, and then you have to sit in, I think it's 100 questions exam at the end. If you're successful and you pass that, then you get this this A2FC certification. And if you want to fly commercially, it's certainly recommended. You don't have to have it for sub 250 gram drones, but as soon as you stick say a little strobe light or a thermal imaging sensor or something else on the drone and you lift it over that weight limit, then you're moving into a different regulatory class, and then it's worthwhile considering doing that. Paul, you had a question?
Yeah, well, just by way of summary actually as well. So here we all are. In my case, I run a business of one. I know we have some people here who run businesses with a number of employees. We could be in any sector. And the starting point for me seems to be that I buy a drone. And I've got from you that I can buy that through my company, or I could buy that individually. and I personally might desire learn how to use it. And there's a learning curve that you're showing us here that involves buying a drone, just like my son bought a drone once. But what I've got the possibility to do now is to use it in my business. And it seems to me for everyone here, the quickest win might be to enhance your own personal or business profile. You can use a drone to fly around your building. You can use a drone to follow you as a filmmaker, just as you're talking to it as you walk along. So you could make quite a good promotional video. And because they're high definition and because they can follow you and object track, there's all kinds of ways that you can improve the the visual relationship between your customers and your potential customers and you and or your premises, your building or your products. Now that obviously lends itself, if you're in, say, agriculture and trees and stuff like that, there are some clear use cases. But it seems to me that already just the ability to object track, the ability to create film seems to be a step forward. What you also were kind of hinting at this morning is if I have an indoor premises, there is even scope to use a drone indoors. And you might use a drone to do a tour around your own office and so on. So it's a camera, and the AI enables you to make quite skillfully promotional stuff. But we're then looking at also the possibility to enhance further, and we're looking at things like geospatial mapping and then more specific things that we can do. You've made it clear, Marcus, that at this level of drone, we're not talking about delivery and we're not talking about pure autonomy or any of that. That's available, but that's further. What I'm noticing is that if I had a company of, say, 5 or 10 people, and we're going to start using drones in different ways, it makes sense, just like we do with any other training, to say to one of our employees, you could become a Python coder, or you could get the health and safety certificate, here's a course. You might actually start saying, who wants to become a qualified drone pilot? You're our in-house drone pilot. And so that creates possibilities very early on for some quick wins in a business around publicity, promotion, navigation, vision stuff. And now I think you're going to take us a bit further.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you've got an opportunity. If you have got staff members or yourself with a new business, and if you take 15% off, 70, that's £59.50, you can become a certified drone pilot, and that certification lasts you for 5 years. And I guess on anyone's CV or website, that looks probably quite good. And I'm coming to an example in a minute where I've been exploring a business opportunity with my local council through conversations in the park and through flying my drone, because ultimately, you need to be aware of the regulations, but also local bylaws. So my local flying area where I usually go out, there are certain bylaws from the councils. They would not allow you to fly a drone there legally. There is people who fly them, but they're not aware of the bylaws, or they just ignore them. However, I've been in touch with the parks rangers and I reach out to them. I spend time, this is all under the umbrella of, I guess you could call it stakeholder management, explaining to him how drones work, spending time, telling him, showing him what they can do, taking him out in the field with me and exploring opportunities. Initially from a business perspective, I'm now involved in a nature conservation project, which I'm going to show you in a minute what this is about. But that also means I can, if I wanted to, bill him the hours for the times I'm flying there. So I've got all of a sudden a business opportunity. But at the same time, they have issued me with a letter from the council saying I can legally fly in this whole area of all these parks, whereas nobody else can, because I'm the only legal pilot out there at the moment. But this is a business opportunity that came out of a passion and just by chance. Anyone can get a certificate, anyone can buy a drone, as you say, from Amazon, and it comes through your letterbox. Maybe not a letterbox if they open the door, because these boxes are quite big, but out of the box, you plug it in, charge it up, learn the basic things to do with it, and you get it up in the air, and you can turn this into a business where before, you wouldn't even have thought, even dreamt of venturing in this kind of space. So let me introduce you to another AI mapping example. We had a very brief session this morning where we were looking at using open drone maps and pictures that were taken, literally with this drone, the DJI Mini, to stitch them together and to model a building structure. Now, from the conversations with the parks rangers here, I have got a bird sanctuary here in the local nature reserve, and that has got a certain problem. And we had a discussion around that problem and looked at different solutions, and all of a sudden, the penny dropped and a sort of light bulb moment, both for me, but more for the parks ranger, really saying, hang on a minute, there's an opportunity here to deploy a drone to do some conservation work right bang on your front door in the park. And that's what I want to show you now. So I'm going to stop this again, go to the optimized. Hopefully that works. And I'll introduce you first of that particular problem. And then I'll show you how I used the drone and Open Drones map to address that. This is an ongoing project. It's by no means finished, so I'll be out soon, very soon again, but give you an idea of what this is about. And I might stop in between so you can ask me questions about this. Hi everyone, I'm out and about, and I took you to one of my favorite places in the nature reserve. I haven't got the drone today with me for a couple of reasons. So first of all, I'm very close to what is known as the slack here, which is a bird sanctuary, and obviously I don't want to disrupt the birds. And also, you probably can see behind me, there's quite a few free roaming horses. They are interested, but sometimes they get a little bit scared of the drone. So I'm going to be mindful of that. I'm going to go out of their way now and getting closer to the water edge. You can probably get a pretty good idea what this looks like here, but I will also share with you some archive footage that I filmed late last year outside the birds' breeding season. So the idea is I'm working with the local parks rangers here on a conservation project, and the reason for that is this whole area you can see here normally would be quite muddy, and I'm actually standing right in the mud at the moment. I don't know if you can see that, certainly on the 360 behind the scenes video. The reason I'm working on a conservation project is because, bird sanctuary, bird breeding ground, but over the last few years we had some problems here, and the reason for that is a invasive plant growth, which is known as New Zealand pygmy weed or Australian stone swamp, I think it is. The Latin name is Crashula Hemsley. That plant used to be sold in UK garden centres and also pet shops actually for fish tanks until 2014. Since then it's been forbidden because the reason is people used to release fishes and put their water and maybe some of the leftover plants into lakes like this, but also what they did is even a tiny figment really of this invasive species of this pygmy weed would grow very, very quickly, and over the last few years this has spread rapidly around the lake. It's growing outside in the muddy area, but it's also actually partially growing under the water. And on some of the geospatial mapping I've done by using different kinds of algorithms and by moving the surface around in a 3D model, you get to see some of this growth later. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to take you out there and give you reasons for doing this conservation type of project. It's very difficult for the park rangers actually to determine how this can be tackled. There are different methods such as mechanical extraction, you can imagine coming with a tractor, digging this all up and collecting it. Problem is it grows very quickly back, particularly in good conditions like muddy, clayey ground that contains a lot of nutrients. One newer method that is currently being developed by a couple of UK universities, and I think the rangers here have been looking into getting in touch with them as well, is getting some equally from New Zealand So spider mite is a very tiny animal, and you need a lot, so millions, billions probably need to spread them. What they do is they eat this pygmy weed, and by doing that it gets very mushy and slushy and sort of decays quickly. The other way that has been used in the past is some kind of pesticide, for instance glyphosate, which is only poisoning as far as I know when it's wet. But the problem is if you spread it in a lake here where there's a lot of water and water birds as well as other animals, it's almost inevitable that you are endangering some of the wildlife. So it's always, you know, a trade-off really, what can be done. Now what I've done is I'm using the drone, working with the park rangers here to determine how big that area is, in particular which areas are covered thickly with this pygmy weed. And once that's been determined, then they can come look into different methods to removing that, whether it's with a mechanical extraction or any of the other means that are available. But first, in order to be able to doing that, you must be able to measure the spread and the growth rate as well. And that's been a very exciting project for me because it's, you know, almost next to my door, but also helps protecting the local wildlife here. So hopefully you found that interesting, and I see you for the next segment when we're looking at the geospatial modeling of this particular area and the growth of the pygmy weed. See you then. Cheers. So once again, I'm stopping this. I'm going back to the.
Oh, I wish I'd been out there with you.
It is lovely, I've got to say, and I do spend an awful lot of time there, not just with the drone, but also with, you know, cameras, bird watching, taking pictures. But it gave you a pretty good idea, hopefully, of a very, you know, almost near my front door problem, and then through a conversation with the rangers, coming up with exploring different solutions for them. And, you know, I'm sure there's many similar use cases for using a drone. You've seen how muddy this is. This area is normally locked during the bird breeding season. You wouldn't even be able to allow to walk into it. But I've been given special exemption to actually fly over there and take that footage and work with the rangers. Is there any particular questions at this point before I go into the sort of plant pattern and growth recognition algorithms that can be used within OpenDrone Maps?
I think we're still watching avidly at the moment.
Okay, and this was not filmed by a drone, but it looks a bit like a drone flying around me. This was a 360 camera with some special editing trickery that made it look like that. And maybe at some point I can come out to Milton Keynes College and then use the same setup indoor the college and basically pretend I'm flying through with the drone when I'm not. So following on, we basically this is a little bit like our production life cycle this morning, where first of all I had to plan a mission. That mission to fly along with that drone was planned with DroneLink. Now we haven't got time to look at the flying pattern within DroneLink. That is something we covered in part one, and everyone who has been attending this morning, I invite you to go back. There's several videos showing different examples. There's a bio corner in the Discovery Center and using DroneLink to explain how one of these mapping missions can work. Once I've done this and I go out, I let it fly in the field, and I did this actually last year already, I collected the data, and when I say data, in this case, this I think again is about 24 pictures. The reason I'm talking about these 24 pictures is because Web OpenDroneMap is a great tool, but it relies heavily on your computational technology and equipment. And now this machine I've got isn't the newest one, but it's still got 16 gigabyte RAMs, and it's struggling. And one of the reasons it's struggling is because it uses a cloud-based setup. So it takes the imaging data, and if you imagine 24 pictures, each of these pictures I think is 12 megabytes or something like that, or it might even be 20 megapixels. So there's quite a lot of data. These pictures are quite big file size wise. They get sent off to Web ODM OpenDroneMap, the software tool I'm going to show you in a minute. That then generates the 2D maps or the 3D maps or some of the plant growth pattern recognition maps. And then you are able to select different algorithms to apply to the data you've loaded in WebODM drone maps. You can see here, this area is basically a surface model. Now, if you look at the, we can do that in a minute, if you look at the picture that was originally taken, the ortho photo of all of these stitched together, there isn't really that much difference here in terms of the coloration, mostly green, mostly brown. But even with a simple RGB, red, green, blue camera that is attached to something like a DJI Mini, or actually some of these pictures are taken with the DJI, the first one, DJI Mini, not the DJI Mini 2, you can determine different elevation levels within there. However, that's not what I'm after. I'm after determining areas within here where this pygmy weed is growing to the point so is so invasive that it shuts down the mud plains that we've seen. Oh, are you back? My computer just stopped. Can you hear me still?
Yes, yes, we can.
Okay, brilliant.
All
Was
good.
little shocking moment because I had a black screen, but it's all back. So the mud plains that we're seeing there, normally, and when I talk about birds, in this sanctuary, there's about 200 different birds breeding during the spring and summer. But with this pygmy weed, it becomes very difficult for them to lay their eggs and even to find any food. So I'm using different algorithms within here. And I've done a list here of the built-in algorithms within this WebODM tool. Bearing in mind, this is a software. It's not open source really, but you could get a free trial, I think. It's about $60 or £60 when you buy it. And it comes with all this built-in algorithmic patterns and AI that allows you to do things like looking, for instance, amount of green vegetation, identifying different areas of plant health. You can deploy certain algorithms better for some type of growth, for instance, citrus grape, sugarcane, or potatoes. Some of this, coming back, I think visual, you mentioned earlier on forestry surveys, some of this could be used to determine photosynthetic rates in forests. So how active or not active are trees in contributing to the overall destruction and usage of CO2. You could do analysis of soil areas. You also could use this in farming. And Chris, early on, when we were talking about some of the use cases, was talking about one of the companies that uses that to predict crop yield and crop health. So all of these are built in, and not only are these are different names, and you can see that in a minute when we have an example how this is being deployed, but at the same time you also got different filters here and different colors that can also be applied. So basically you having a range of literally hundreds of different combinations built within WebODM, Web Open Drone Maps, to do this kind of analysis. And I'll give you now an example of what I've done with the data I've collected in this nature reserve.
And just being clear, Marcus,
Again.
Marcus, sorry, if you could just pause. So at this stage, you're still not coding in Python. You're
No.
not an AI expert. I've still
No.
got my drone. I've still
Yeah.
got my mobile phone. I'm still using the apps that you've talked about, the native or the third-party apps that I can download. You've clearly gone down a learning curve that everyone here would do. At the moment, this is a case study of recognition of plants, but we could, in theory, recognize other things as well, and so on. So at the moment, nobody listening or watching think now I've got to buy encoders. Now I can do this in my business, and we're still with the same Marcus who hasn't suddenly, had a brain transplant or bought loads of expertise in. It's you.
No, I'm not a biologist. I'm not a conservationist. I'm a drone user who developed an interest in budget-friendly turnkey solutions, off-the-shelf stuff that you can buy without having to go through the pain of either sitting there soldering, building your drone, and I showed you examples of this in the session this morning, or sitting there opening a big Python screen and some Jupyter dashboards or whatever and starting writing all this Python code. Nothing like that. I want to use stuff. I want to deploy it, and I want to see where the journey gets me. And that's how I ended up there. And, you know, my background is not biologist. You could probably ask me a little bit like I don't know, you could probably call me a citizen scientist, and I'd take that as a compliment. Or Paul might call me as a mad hatter, and I also take that as a compliment. But equally, all of this is available to you anytime, right now, if you have got a good enough computer, I'd say a good enough laptop, and a little bit of a little bit of budget you can play around with. None of this is rocket science. None of this is restrictive. So let's go to that. Let's have a look at the example. And this is again using Open Web ODM, OpenThrone Maps. Let's see if this works. Yeah. Following on from our excursion and taking pictures of the part of the bird sanctuary that has been infested with pygmy weed, as we show in the previous flying session or on location session, I'm now going into Web ODM, OpenThrone Maps again, and I want to use this to undertake some plant health analysis. Now, in order to do that, I switch here to plant health, and I open up the layer menu that will give me a variety of algorithms that I can use to overlay the picture with. You can already see the picture that was taken with the drone. Again, that's about 24 pictures, I think, stitched together. We can remove that so you get to see the area here. Now, the area impacted by the pygmy weed infestation is really around the section at the coast where it is normally quite muddy, but you can see already quite overgrown. And as I bring this in, the algorithm actually highlights where most of these areas are that are infested, and these dark green areas in particular is where this pygmy weed is growing. Now I'm using this is the sort of standard algorithm that's coming up, normalized difference vegetation index, which would show the amount of green vegetation. I've made a note there of a couple of other algorithms that might be worthwhile exploring for this particular analysis, and it changes the coloring. So EVI is the enhanced vegetation index, useful in areas where the NDVI might saturate, and it uses blue wavelengths to correct some of these soil signals. And if I do that, then you can see the coloration even gets more stronger, and all these areas here are actually the areas that are most infected with the pygmy weed. Remember, when looking at this, this is actually a picture from Google. This is not the picture that I took when I flew the drone here. However, obviously using the algorithm is now coloring in the actual pictures or the ortho photos that were taken. And that shows the infestation quite well. Based on the table I provided in the slides, the slide deck for you, you can see sometimes there's more than one filter available, and sometimes there's more than one, usually in most cases, I think there's more than one different color schemes available. So you can play around with that and see whether that helps further improving what is being shown. It's really a little bit playing around with, to be honest. Again, here, I think particularly these areas where there's the green and the red would suggest strong growth of this pygmy weed. And let's try another algorithm quickly as well, which I noticed sometimes works quite good, which is the EXG one. That's the excess green index, derived from certain wavelength bands within the light that is being reflected. You can see here it's supposed to emphasize the greenness of leafy crops such as potatoes, but I think again this could work quite well here. And once looking at this, I think there's a good separation between, this is where the pygmy weed is growing. This is the area where we're more going into the water. And this is some of the growth area. So this, as we would expand that map, you should be able to see a differentiation between the actual trees and the leaves, the soil surface, and some of the pygmy weed. Let's go back to the standard red, yellow, green pattern. And again, I think this in particular is where we have got that infestation. Let's go back to the author photo, see if we can confirm that. Remembering this is actually the Google photo, so we didn't take this, but we took this with the drone, and yes, it would confirm that. So here in particular is a widespread infestation of that pygmy weed, and some of the local nature conservationists have already confirmed to me that that is actually a pretty good representation of what's going on there. So I just think my picture stuck a little bit. So that's how you can use WebODM for plant health analysis. Of course, you also can do surface modeling. I have taken some pictures last year of that water area, which is quite interesting because you can flip it around and almost look under the water surface when you deploy the 3D model. But all in all, I just want to give you an idea of what this can look like and how you can use algorithms that are built in within OpenDrone maps to determine the plant health of an ecosystem and identify potential problems. Obviously, you can also use it for farming purposes. You can use it to determine the humidity of soil and so on. This is really just scratching the surface of what is possible. But I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you back in the session. Thank you. Okay, so back to our normal sharing screen. Any questions either from Paul or from any of our attendees in this
I
workshop?
just wanted to, can I bring in someone? Hopefully you're still here. Shailesh, are you there? Just checking. No, okay. So what's next for you, Marcus, just before you take us a bit further as well? Where's your curiosity taking you with drones?
I'm certainly looking forward to new releases. So the DJI Mini 3, if it comes in April, and usually some of these leakers on the internet, you can go by. So I've been following them for a while. When I say a while, I mean a good few years. That'll be interesting because that will certainly have a better sensor, meaning better low light imaging. I haven't, in all my flying, I haven't done a lot of night flying, I have to say. For the reason it's quite weird if you fly at night because you have to change the camera settings. You have to make sure you get the right exposure. I did make an exception to that. I think a year ago we had a local art exhibition of it's known as the Global Rainbow, that travels around the world. It's basically lasers shooting into the night sky, and they weren't very far away from me. And particularly because it was COVID as well, and everyone was in lockdown, I think it was a great opportunity to get out and actually, first of all, see this, and then also capture it as pictures and video. And maybe I'll stick that on the website as well, so you get an idea of what night flying with a drone can look like. That is an area I'd like to explore more. I'd love to have a drone at some point that has got thermal imaging sensors, because that opens up the whole area of things you can see, whether that's search or rescue, or just in my nature reserve, some of the animals you would otherwise easily miss, particularly some of the bigger ones. I'm not talking about birds, but I know we've got badgers here, we've got foxes, obviously a lot of horses, and I guess, really playing around with the technology. I'd like to explore more of this WebODM drone map capabilities. This morning, when I showed you the building of the Discovery Center, that was purely modeled based on 24 pictures where the camera is facing 90 degrees horizontally down. If you combine that with footage taken either also from the drone camera or from a static camera just standing outside with the, around the building, you can actually get a complete model of the building without these open spots. And I'd really like to explore what's possible here.
Yeah.
I'd like to explore, and I said at the beginning, I'm a visual storyteller. I'd like to explore how I can combine different footages 360 in a spatial way with some of the drone footage we've seen. And bearing in mind, you can do 360 footage with a drone, certainly pictures. You could send a drone up, you could take, I don't know how many it is, I think it's 36 pictures, panorama, and then stitch these together in the software, and you end up with a sphere and planet pictures, and some people very creative in that particular space.
Yeah.
That's something I'd like to explore,
Question
and
from,
really, I don't know, to be honest.
Okay, so lots of possibilities. Question from Vishal, actually is quite an important one. If you were doing stuff like conserving in forests, in ways that are trying to keep illegal logging and smugglers in some way, and the drone is, noticing them and reporting them, however that's done, is it still very easy just to shoot them down? Can you get armor? Can you protect drones from that? Can they dodge out of the way by identifying a threat? I mean, how does all that work?
I mean, shooting down depends how good your shooting skills are and what
Yeah, but
gun
you might be
you're
using a robot to do it.
They might be using a robot. So there is, of course, drone deterrence up there, because we've seen a couple of years ago when apparently or allegedly there were drones outside Gatwick Airport. There's an exploration of new technologies, how we can remove drones safely from the sky without causing too much damage. And I read a couple of weeks ago, there's another drone now that's got a built-on microwave cannon, basically, that can shoot down drones. 2 years ago, it was either Sweden or somewhere in the Netherlands, they trained a bird of prey. The police force trained the bird of prey to fly up in the sky, and because of they got quite strong grip to take out drones, basically the natural way. I don't think that worked very well. At some point, the bird of prey retired. I don't think it was too bothered about drones, because plastic doesn't taste very well, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, we talked about Amazon deliveries and sort of modern day piracy at the beginning, and this was before you recorded for this session, but maybe that was one of the reasons why Amazon Prime decided this isn't for us right now. Because if you live in a rural area and you know that regularly you've got Amazon Prime delivery drones flying over your house with high value items, you could explore putting up just a big net or some sort of a trapping mechanism to get the drone out of the sky and take whatever is in the box and use it as a surprise, get that kind of stuff. But at the same time, I think one of our attendees earlier mentioned in Germany and also in the UK, they've been trying to fly out drones to emergencies with built-in defibrillators in case someone has got a heart attack in a rural area and the ambulance cannot get to them. The drone usually could get much quicker, and there's some use cases there for that as well. So yeah, we'll see.
Here's just a challenge I wanted to leave to the end, because I haven't told you I was going to do this. So this is a challenge for you and your knowledge and your drones. So I'm a wedding photographer.
Yeah.
And I want to somehow use drones in my wedding photography. And I've got feedback from my customers. And what they want to do is they want a drone to be present at the wedding for, say, half an hour. And essentially what happens is we're trying something out that we want to use the following ability, so that at any time I could somehow instruct the drone to follow the bride and groom, or follow the mum and the dad or the kids for 5 minutes and take photographs of them. So it doesn't take photographs of anyone else, it just takes photographs of them. There's your first challenge. And that would be brilliant, because we can just leave me to go off and do something else, or I might even leave my drone to take the photographs. The second one is it needs to be able to switch from still pictures to video, which is of course a big part of wedding photography. And then the third part is I actually want to give the power, this could be a different drone, to all of the guests. Okay, so this is kind of a bit of fun, but essentially what happens is whenever a guest says smile, they are object identified, or the people with them, and the drone will take a picture of them. while they say the word smile, it activates a camera shot, and it's all clear and it's all lovely. Is all of that possible for me at the moment as a wedding photographer?
So some things are possible, and I give you responses to each of those, but not necessarily off the shelf. So you have to be creative and come up with methodologies.
No, that's fine. I'm happy to do that. I'm just asking if it's possible.
So the first one, follow around the bride and groom for 5 minutes. Yeah, absolutely, that's possible. The drone I would use for that is a Skydio 2. It's the one with the best autonomous capabilities and the safest obstacle avoidance. There's some funny YouTube videos, actually, if you look, wedding photographers, and sometimes they pop up on television as well in these shows, where drones are basically flying in bride and groom. Obviously, we don't want that. We don't want bloodstains on white wedding dress necessarily, but the Skydio is very, very good in doing that. And what the Skydio further could do is, in terms of following around them specifically, is you can control the Skydio with a beacon, which is basically, it's like a remote control from a television, smaller than that actually, that you put in your pocket, and the Skydio knows where you are. You give it certain parameters, stay 10 meters up, stay 20 meters behind, or and all of a sudden it starts circling around, you're taking pictures, whatever. The taking pictures and the video, frankly, isn't that particularly difficult, because you could do two at the same time. You can record a video on your smartphone and at the same time take a picture. You could program the drone that it films a video and every 10 seconds records a picture.
Well,
in fact, if you wanted to get the best pictures out of 4K video footage, all you do is you select the frame you want to have, and here's your 20 megapixel picture automatically. Not difficult. Getting people out of the wedding photo that you don't want to be on there, well, at the moment there's television adverbs of a new, I think it's a Google Pixel smartphone. You take picture, or Samsung, I don't know. You take pictures, there's people on there you don't like, you click on them on the screen, the AI knows what you selected and just removes them. I use a photo editing software called Luminar, Luminar Neo and Luminar AI. That software uses AI to do all that kind of stuff, certainly on pictures, no problem. Taking pictures based on facial recognition when someone is smiling. In theory, yes. So you can get better digital cameras. So I'm not talking about a smartphone necessarily, but even smartphones can do that now. They have got imaging recognition, and if they see someone smiling, or
so that
teeth,
sounds like that sounds possible too.
take a picture. Not impossible.
It sounds like I need to, as a photographer, obviously I might be able to offer this if I develop it, but as somebody buying wedding photography, I'm going to have to get, probably quite trusting in this before I'm going to replace my wedding photographer. But it could be there's a business opportunity here for a wedding photographer. We're in the last 10 minutes, Marcus. Is there anything else you want to share with us before we draw to a close today?
There is, because obviously this course or this workshop was with a particular focus on business case, use cases. However, as you've seen from my business use case, if you like, nature conversation project, I've come across a fantastic project which is called Iguanas from Above in the Galapagos Islands. Some of the usage of drones actually was featured in Martin Clune's recent Galapagos Islands program, I think CS3, and part of the marine iguanas were also wildly featured on Planet Earth too. And you might remember where they are loitering around the beach and all of a sudden all these snakes are coming out and trying to take them. This is one of the most iconic scenes, actually, I've been told, of Planet Earth. So I've spoken to the not the Galapagos Conservation Trust, but through them I got in touch with a project called Iguanas from Above. What they do is they use consumer drones on a boat, or even on a dinghy of some sort. They have a lot of batteries with them because it takes up to 3-5 hours to get to the coastlines where the iguanas are sitting. So they need to be fully prepared. And I mentioned a little bit about this in this morning's session already. They go out, they fly the drone up into the air, they took aerial pictures. Now I asked them if they use mapping software, and interestingly, they don't use mapping software for the simple reason there is no reliable mobile phone network fast enough to doing that. So what I do with DroneLink, designing my map and then loading it onto a smartphone, that does require 4G or 5G because you got data transmission. In the Galapagos Islands, particularly at the coastline, it's not that easy. So often what they do is they fly manually, but they try to still replicate this flight path, this certain pattern with the overlap of the pictures. They collect the pictures, they then make the aerial imaging available through a platform called Zooniverse. Now, Zooniverse is a citizen science project where they use AI to allocate those pictures to users and make sure that at least 20 users get to see these pictures. The idea is they take aerial footage of the coastlines with marine iguanas, but not just that. There is adult iguanas, there is juvenile iguanas, there is sometimes on a picture just the tail, not the whole iguana. There's sea lions, there's plants, there's algae, and sadly also quite a lot of plastic rubbish. So they ask then users to look at these pictures. They use a software within the Zooniverse tool to identify whatever users think they're seeing on the picture. They collect that humanly intelligent augmented data then and analyze it. And by doing that, they can understand growth patterns, migratory patterns of the marine iguanas. Now, I've done an interview with this lady, the project lead, Dr. Amy McLeod. It's almost an hour, I think, a little bit longer than an hour. Obviously, we're way beyond what we've got here, but I'm making it available through the AI Drones training page, as well as smaller chunks if you focused on particular questions. And I recommend you go there, watch it, be amazed how simple drones like this are used now by scientists on proper conservation projects. And we're really talking about a potentially longitudinal study there, because the iguanas are not going to go away, but they need to be monitored closely. And there's some offshoots coming out of this, like identification of plastic pollution at the seas. Now, if you are an AI company and you feel inspired by what I'm sharing with you here, and certainly inspired by watching that interview, these guys, these scientists, are looking specifically for AI companies who want to work with them, collaborate with them, and develop algorithms that do this pattern recognition of these iguanas and the sea lions and the red crabs and everything else automatically, and then maybe use it in combination with the human intelligence, because by doing that, they think they will get better detection rates and obviously can understand finer deviations within the data. So if you're an AI company, or if you know an AI company that is interested in doing this kind of thing, get in touch with me. I'll put you in touch with them, and there could be a potential business project coming out of it, not just for business purposes, but also for doing really good. We haven't got time for group exercise here anymore. We done it early on anyway. So I think that really brings me to the last page, where I want to say thank you to all of you for attending this afternoon. Thank you to Paul for being my wingman, co-pilot, air traffic controller, and for not shooting me down. So I'm still going. And of course, very, very much, thank you very much to MK College, the MK Skills Hub, for making this workshop possible, and also to MKAI, the inclusive community. Happy woman, happy International Women's Day to everyone who joined us today. I'm delighted that we have a good mix in the audience as well, both this morning and this afternoon. And that's all for me, really. Go to the website, have a look, airdronestrainings.com. That works now. Thank you, Henry, for pointing out it didn't work early on. I changed some of the sharing settings. And all the other links that are relevant to what we discussed here and this morning are also listed, and the slides I think will be made available via MKAI, and I'll probably stick them on the website as well. That's all I got to say to you. Any more questions?
A huge thanks to Marcus. As we've said, we'll share the video, which is recording. We're just going to press stop. Hopefully Alex will stop recording this now. We will also share all the slides